I blacked out when my body couldn't take the hits anymore. And when I opened my eyes with blood in my mouth, he was pretending he'd saved me. The man who almost killed me, calling me baby while rehearsing his own lie. The first thing I heard when I came to was his breathing, not the breathing of a panicked man, but the breathing of someone practicing the right emotion before the audience arrives. It was a sound I already knew, the same one he used before humiliating me in front of other people, dressing cruelty up as concern. And there, sprawled on the cold living room floor, I realized my body had shut down to survive, like it flipped the breaker before it could burn all the way out. The sound of impact was still echoing inside my head. The house was silent, that complicit, muffled silence that only exists in homes where violence has learned to walk barefoot. I tried to move my fingers, tried to understand where I was, but my mind was still floating in a limbo where pain and confusion blended together. The first thing he said when he realized I was waking up was whispered way too close to my ear. "Don't scare me like that, Naomi. You took a nasty fall." A fall? He said it like my legs had just buckled on their own, like I'd tripped over thin air. But I remembered. I remembered his hand shoving me. I remembered his voice changing, that shift that always meant, "Don't talk right now." I remembered fear flooding my body like ice water. He lifted me into his arms, but it wasn't affection. It was performance. And I saw it. I swear I saw it. How he practiced his desperate face before stepping out the door with my limp body in his arms. He adjusted his expression like someone adjusting a mask. The mask he wore so well when he needed to look like the perfect man. The caretaker, the devoted husband. The abuser turning into the hero. The arsonist carrying the bucket of water. As he took me to the car, I caught his scent. That scent that used to mean safety, but now was a trigger. My chest locked up. And even through the dizziness, I noticed something important. The way he kept repeating, like a mantra, "She fell, she fell, she fell." He wasn't comforting me. He was rehearsing the lie. At the hospital, his performance leveled up. "She's been really stressed, always running around. I think she pushed herself too hard." "It was a fall, doctor, in the kitchen. I got there right in time." My wife is strong, but sometimes she overdoes it. Overdoes it. He loved that word, a word that shrinks you, that invalidates you, that turns a scream into a sigh and pain into drama. When I tried to speak, my throat locked up. It wasn't just fear, it was shame. A shame that wasn't mine, yet I carried it like it was. Women like me know that shame. The shame of not leaving sooner, the shame of still being there, the shame of feeling responsible for your own pain. Meanwhile, the doctor watched me with eyes that were trying to decode something. And that's when I noticed the second symbol of that night. The look that tries to see and the look that tries to hide. Jerome squeezed my hand like it was protection, but I knew what it was, a warning. His silent way of saying, "Stick to my version." And even so, something inside me started to crack. If you've ever been through something that left you unable to speak, something so unfair you had to act like you were fine just to survive, please like this video, subscribe, and share it. That tells me you're here with me. And tell me in the comments, friend, have you ever had to pretend everything was okay so it wouldn't get worse, physically or emotionally? When we got back home, the silence felt like a wall between us. And there, as I walked slowly toward the bedroom, I noticed the third symbol, the door creaking. That door always creaked before something bad happened, and that night it creaked like it was warning me this still wasn't the end, it was only the beginning. Lying in bed, my body felt heavy, like it was made of stone. Every bruise throbbed with what he was trying to deny. Every breath hurt like it had been stolen. And in the middle of it all, something in me awoke. Not strength, not yet, but awareness. Awareness that if I didn't find my voice, he would keep writing my story. I didn't know how. I didn't know when. But that night, I understood the blackout wasn't the end. It was the line being crossed. And when a woman hits her limit, the story starts to change, even slowly, even in the dark. Because as I closed my eyes, one question cut straight through me. If he needed to pretend he was my hero, what exactly is he afraid I'll find out? And that question would be the thread that unraveled the whole truth. And this is where my story really begins. The truth is, what happened that night didn't come out of nowhere. It was just the peak of something slow, quiet, and daily. A process that, by the time I noticed, had already stolen my voice, my gestures, my schedule, even the way I breathed inside my own home. In the days after I passed out, Jerome put on the caring husband costume. He'd wake up before me, pour coffee into the mug he'd picked for me. "This one suits you, Naomi. You don't need to think. I'll choose for both of us." And set the table with the precision of someone arranging a set. And me, still aching, I felt like I didn't fit in that scene, this play where I was never the main character. But friend, believe me, it's the smallest details that expose an abuser long before the violence shows up. Jerome would say things nobody would label as cruel, but my chest knew. "You don't know how to pick out clothes. You're so slow, you hold everything up. Let me talk, you always get all twisted up. Naomi, you forget everything. That's why you get things wrong." And I accepted it. I accepted it because I was tired. I accepted it because, little by little, I started believing I needed him to decide everything for me. That's the first kind of captivity. The tiny injustices that slowly erase a woman until she thinks disappearing is normal. I remember one night in particular. I'd spent hours cleaning the kitchen. The floor shined, the smell of soap still hung in the air. Jerome walked in, looked around, and said, "Looks good. You finally learned how to do it right." Not "thank you," not "this looks great," not "I appreciate you," but finally, like I'd been failing for years. And I was so exhausted, I caught myself chasing validation in that crooked little compliment. That hurts to admit, but it's real. Another symbol I started noticing during that phase was the hallway door. It creaked every time he came near. The sound was small, almost nothing, but for me, it became a warning. Every time that door creaked, my whole body would tense, like it was bracing for the next judgment, the next comment, the next bit of control. Jerome also started showing up anywhere I was. If I stayed too long in the backyard, he'd appear behind me. "What are you doing out here by yourself?" If I took longer in the bathroom, he'd knock. "Are you okay? You're taking forever." If I talked to Alicia on the phone, he'd ask, "What are you telling her?" And worse, when I said nothing, he'd smile in that way that wasn't a smile. It was a warning. His surveillance got worse any time I showed the slightest spark of autonomy, whether it was choosing an item at the store or giving a simple opinion about a movie. It was like every opinion I had was a threat to his order. And the saddest part is, without realizing it, I started shrinking so I wouldn't set him off. I talked less, I took up less space on the couch, I tried not to make noise walking through the house. I ate slower so he wouldn't get irritated. I breathed quieter at night. Yes, I learned to breathe small. And women who breathe small are surviving, not living. But listen to me, friend. That isn't failure, it's survival. Your soul protects you the best way it can. His control grew so subtly that by the time I noticed, my phone wasn't really mine anymore. He'd pick it up by accident almost every day, put it on silent, move it somewhere else, swipe through it like he was checking notifications without asking. And he'd always say, "Relax, Naomi, I just wanted to see what time it is." But you know, a controlling man controls everything, even the clock. And the more he performed perfect for other people, the crueler he got in private. His family thought I was just too sensitive, because that's what he told them. Naomi imagines things. She's been fragile. She gets stressed over nothing. You can't take everything she says so seriously. The worst kind of violence is the kind nobody believes. And it was in that suffocating routine that I noticed something small, but so loud it became the trigger for my suspicions. The wooden box. It kept moving around for no reason. Sometimes it was open, sometimes it was closed, sometimes it disappeared from the living room. Jerome had never cared about that box, not once. And now, all of a sudden, it seemed like the center of the house. It was there, watching that old little box, that something inside me started to wake up. Like my instincts were saying, something is hidden here, something is off. The box became my first warning sign, just like the creaking door, just like the phone, just like my own body trying to tell me truths I couldn't carry alone. And it was exactly at that point, at that stage of piled up micro-cruelties, growing surveillance, and objects shifting like unintentional clues, that the first clear sign appeared that his world was about to crack. And that sign was about to show up right in front of me in a way I never expected. Fear doesn't make noise when it arrives. It settles in slowly, like dust collecting in the corners of a house, until one day you realize you can't breathe anymore. And that's exactly how I began to understand that Jerome's violence didn't live only in the shouting, the heavy hands, or the explosions. It lived in the details, in the small things that changed places, in objects that appeared where I hadn't left them, in silences that lasted too long, in glances that were too quick. The first thing I noticed was my phone. Before, I'd leave it anywhere, the table, the couch, the kitchen. Now, every time I went looking for it, it was somewhere else. And it wasn't coincidence. It was a pattern. "Oh, babe, I grabbed it by accident." "It was on the floor. I thought you might trip." "Wow, you really need to be more careful." But I knew. I knew by the way he held it. Too firm, too familiar, like someone gripping an extension of my life. And every time he handed it back to me, the screen was always face down. Always. The second symbol that started to take shape was the mirror. Every morning, there was a new bruise, one fading while another appeared. Marks in different stages, like my body was telling a story my mouth still didn't have the courage to tell. Sometimes I'd touch my skin and think, did I really hit myself there? Or was it... And before the thought could finish, Jerome would appear behind me. Always behind, always too close. "Stop staring at yourself so much, Naomi. You're getting paranoid. I told you, you sleep all twisted up." But when my eyes met his in the reflection, I saw irritation. An irritation that said, don't look too closely, don't ask too many questions. The third clue, the most symbolic one, was the wooden box. The box he had never touched before, the box that now moved every single day. Sometimes on top of the media console, sometimes on the floor, sometimes open, sometimes slammed shut. And what gave me chills wasn't the box itself. It was the way Jerome reacted when he noticed me watching it. He looked away too fast, fast like someone afraid of being found out. Those three symbols became part of my silent investigation. The phone, my own body, the wooden box. And for the first time, I started connecting dots I'd ignored just to survive. His behavior began to change too. Before, he controlled the house. Now, he controlled my breathing. If I sighed differently, he'd ask, "Why did you make that face?" If I walked toward the door, he'd appear. "Where are you going?" If I took too long to answer, he'd step closer. "What are you hiding?" It was like he was suddenly afraid some piece of the truth would slip out through a crack he hadn't managed to seal. And the more I observed, the more I understood. Jerome wasn't just controlling, he was controlling out of fear. That became clear one quiet afternoon. I was folding clothes in the bedroom when I heard the dry sound of notifications being deleted in the office. It wasn't messages coming in, it was messages being erased. 1, 2, 3. Then silence. My heart jumped into my throat. It wasn't paranoia, it wasn't imagination, it was intentional deletion. Jerome walked out of the office with a tense face, trying to mask it with a smile, a crooked, rushed smile that fell apart before it fully formed. "Everything okay in there?" I asked, pretending to be distracted. "Just taking care of some work stuff." But his voice was dry, that dryness men use when they try to hide lies by swallowing words. Later that night, when he fell asleep, something inside me asked me to get up, to watch, to investigate. I walked toward the office, my heart pounding so loudly it felt like it echoed through the floor. The door was slightly open. The bluish glow of the screen was still on, and there, in the center of the room, like a sign placed in my path, was the wooden box. This time, the lid wasn't quite closed. My hands shook when I touched it. A chill ran up my spine. It was like the box was calling me, or warning me. I opened it, slowly. The bottom was empty, but that emptiness spoke louder than any object ever could. Because what scared me wasn't that there was nothing inside, it was realizing that someone who had never cared about that box before was now moving it every day. That meant one thing. Jerome was hiding something, or looking for something he thought I had hidden, and neither possibility was good. After the empty box, everything became clearer. The pattern, the control, the surveillance, the deleted messages, the bruises he wanted me to forget, and most of all, his look. A look that now carried not just control, but fear of losing control. And that, friend, is the beginning of an abuser's downfall, when he starts to fear that his narrative might collide with the truth. I didn't have proof yet, I didn't have courage yet, but I had perception. And perception is the first step towards freedom. Because that night, as I closed the wooden box, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. I wasn't imagining things anymore. I was seeing. And what was about to appear in front of me without any warning would be the final confirmation that my life was hanging by a thread and that he knew it. And it was right there in my story that I hit the first major shock. The truth doesn't arrive like an explosion. It comes like a whisper. And when you realize it, the ground is already gone beneath your feet. That day, everything started with a simple detail. Too small to be coincidence, too big to ignore. Jerome left the house saying he needed to take care of something important. The way he said important carried tension, not urgency. And when he closed the front door, the creak, that sound that had become an omen, echoed through the house. I stood still for a few seconds, listening to the silence spread through the rooms, as if the house itself were waiting. That's when I noticed it. His office door was slightly open. Jerome never left that door like that. Never. A chill ran through my body. It wasn't courage. It wasn't curiosity. It was instinct. The instinct that said that in that exact moment, I had to look. Each step toward the office felt heavier than the last. My breathing was shallow, my heart racing, like my body already knew I was about to see something that would change everything. When I gently pushed the door open, I saw what I wasn't expecting. The wooden box. Open. Wide open. Like it had been abandoned in a hurry. I moved closer, fear pulsing at the base of my neck. That box had been my warning sign for weeks, but in that moment, it felt like it was calling me. At the bottom, there was a manila envelope, plain, simple, but with words written in the top corner that made my legs tremble. Dr. Leanne Morris, preliminary report. my world went silent. The air seemed to disappear from the room. With shaking hands, I opened the envelope. The first line cut through my chest like a blade. Bruising in different stages of healing, pattern consistent with ongoing assault. My vision blurred. I wasn't making it up. I wasn't exaggerating, like he said. I wasn't confused. My body had been telling the truth, and someone had finally listened. I kept reading, my heart tightening with every word. Patient hesitates when asked about the origin of injuries, possible shame, fear, or coercion. I swallowed hard. That was it. She had seen it. The doctor had seen what I tried to hide because I was afraid to die. And Jerome knew. That's why the box. That's why the control. That's why the deleted messages. That's why his eyes were always watching. But the document had more. At the end, the doctor recommended follow-up care and a formal reassessment, meaning she had activated a protocol. She was trying to protect someone Jerome believed could never be protected. I was about to put the envelope back when a sound made my stomach drop. The front door creaking. He was back early, too unexpected. Panicking, I returned the envelope to the box, closed the lid, and rushed to the kitchen, pretending I was just filling a glass of water. My fingers clinked against the glass, betraying my shaking. When he walked into the living room, I almost felt the temperature change. Jerome had that power, the power to shift the air before he ever spoke. He looked at me like someone measuring, checking, hunting. "What are you doing, Naomi?" he asked without breaking eye contact. My voice came out weak, but steady. "Just water." He took one step closer. That step was never just a step. It was territory, invasion, warning. Just that. A short, dry sound, but it said more than words. He walked slowly through the room, like someone scenting something in the air. I watched his body move, my heart beating out of rhythm. He stopped beside the box, touched the lid, just touched it, and smiled. Not the fake smile he gave other people, but that small, crooked smile that only appeared when he felt in control. "This box, was it moved?" he asked, without looking at me. I swallowed hard. No, it was a lie, and he knew it. His eyes slowly lifted to meet mine. Cold, curious, dangerous. And that's when I understood, for the first time, Jerome wasn't just suspicious. Jerome was afraid. Because men like him are only afraid of one thing: truth they don't control. He took a deep breath, like someone choosing to postpone an explosion. And then, with the calm that terrifies the most, he said, "Naomi, sometimes you imagine things. I just want to help you." That sentence, "you imagine things," was the spark, the one that set everything inside me on fire. Because in that moment, carrying the weight of that hidden report, I finally understood. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't alone. And he knew his narrative was hanging by a thread. And it was exactly that realization, that quiet shift inside me, that triggered everything that came next. From that point on, nothing would ever be the same. Not for me, and not for him. When I realized Jerome was suspicious of me, something very deep shifted inside my body. And it wasn't panic. It wasn't despair. It was a kind of internal alertness, a new, almost instinctive awareness that said, from now on, one wrong move could cost you your life. I couldn't rush anymore. I couldn't react impulsively. I had to observe, to study every move he made, every word, every silence. I had to turn fear into strategy. In the days that followed, Jerome seemed more present than usual, present in a suffocating way. He didn't just appear in every room I entered, he arrived before I did, as if he could predict my steps, as if he was trying to stay 1 second ahead of me, controlling everything. I opened the bathroom drawer. "What are you looking in there, Naomi?" I stepped into the backyard to breathe. "You never spend time out here. You're acting strange." I smiled at a message from Alicia, and he asked flatly, "Why did you smile? Who are you talking to?" It felt like living inside a transparent cage. I could move, but never without being watched. And ironically, it was inside that extreme surveillance that my plan was born. Jerome believes silence meant submission, so I became exactly what he expected to see: quiet, controlled, predictable. He didn't realize my silence wasn't surrender, it was camouflage. I stopped arguing, stopped explaining, stopped pushing back even over the smallest things. And the quieter I became, the more he relaxed. That gave me space. Very little, but enough. The first thing I did was create secret rituals disguised as routine. I started organizing the bathroom towels every night. But what I was really doing was hiding a small card and a spare key inside them. Then I began checking the pantry every day. But what I was actually checking was whether the envelope was still in the box. Not to take it, just to see if he'd touched it. I discreetly photographed my bruises in the reflection of the bedroom window at times when soft daylight hit just right. My phone stayed hidden under my pillow, not because it was the best hiding place, but because Jerome would never imagine I'd dare hide something so obvious. That was another part of my plan, to hide things where he'd never believe I had the courage to hide them. I also started paying attention to his words. When Jerome was nervous, he repeated patterns without realizing it. Phrases that once were just unsettling started to feel like clues. "I know what's best. Be careful not to make things up. Don't talk too much with the doctor. You've been remembering things wrong." Each sentence was a brick in the psychological wall he was trying to build around me. But the most revealing brick came one rainy afternoon. He was on his phone deleting messages. I recognized that dry sound of things being erased. I was mopping the living room when I heard him murmur, "This can't leak." His hand trembled, and that tremor told me everything. Jerome was hiding something bigger than I'd imagined. Something beyond the violence, something he knew could be exposed. Right then, while he erased messages and I pretended not to hear, I felt a new kind of strength rise in my chest, so unfamiliar it almost scared me. It wasn't brute strength, it was clarity. The clarity of knowing I couldn't and shouldn't try to take him down right then. Because women die exactly like that, when they confront an abuser at the peak of his paranoia. I had to be strategic, patient, silent, like water carving stone without making a sound. I began recording times, when he left, when he came back, when he got restless, when he received calls. Everything was information. Everything was a piece of a puzzle I didn't yet know how to assemble, but for the first time, I could see. But the biggest step in my internal plan wasn't an action. It was an emotional decision. I stopped trying to convince Jerome of my pain. I stopped trying to see me. I stopped justifying my existence. This was no longer about proving anything to him. It was about proving something to myself. I wanted to live, and I would do it quietly until the day I could do it in peace. That shift inside me, subtle but powerful, began to change the atmosphere in the house. Jerome couldn't explain it, but he felt it. I saw it in his eyes. Something was off. Something was slipping. Something was no longer under control. And it was precisely during this period of strategic silence that the first major crack appeared, one that would bring his entire structure down. A sentence slipped out, a sentence he should never have let escape. And that sentence changes everything. The sentence that shattered his mask came without warning, like a glass slipping from someone's hand and breaking on the floor in silence. The kind of silence that hurts more than noise. It was late afternoon. The sky was heavy, that gray light that makes everything feel tighter. I was in the living room folding clothes when I heard Jerome in the hallway, speaking on the phone in a voice that was too low. His voice wasn't shaking, but the air between his words was. Yes, she still doesn't know anything. It sounded simple, but it was devastating. I froze mid-motion. My heart didn't race, it stopped. Because that sentence didn't sound like concern. It sounded like strategy, like someone trying to contain something leaking through the cracks. When he realized I was there, he hung up too fast, too sudden, too guilty. His eyes searched for mine with a mix of irritation and alarm, and for the first time, I saw fear behind the mask. Small, almost imperceptible, but there. And when men like Jerome feel fear, their world starts to fracture. That night, he pretended everything was normal. He had dinner with me, commented on the weather, asked shallow questions about my day, empty questions, mechanical questions, the kind asked by someone trying to keep control through habit, not truth. I answered with as few words as possible. It wasn't rebellion, it was calculation. In the deep silence of the early morning when he finally fell asleep, I lay awake, listening to his breathing, learning the patterns. Jerome always shifted positions when he was anxious. That night, he barely rested, and something inside me, a quiet, ancient part of me he had tried to kill, finally woke up. He's not invincible. He's coming apart. The next morning, chaos arrived. Jerome got a phone call. I didn't hear what was said, but I heard what the call did to him. His posture changed, his shoulders stiffened, his eyes narrowed, his breathing sped up, like his heart had run ahead of his body. "What do you mean you want to talk to her?" he whispered sharply. "She has nothing to say. I already explained everything." Who were you? Why did they want to talk to me? And most importantly, why was he so desperate to stop it? When he walked into the living room, the door creaking like a warning, I felt something serious was about to happen. "Naomi," he said, closing the door slowly like he was setting a scene, "we need to talk." Those words never meant conversation. In his mouth, they meant emotional confinement. He positioned himself between me and the door. Strategy. Always strategy. "You've been twisting things," he said, his voice too calm to be honest. "I'm trying to protect you, but you're making it difficult." "Protect me from what, Jerome?" The question slipped out before I could stop it, and the moment I asked, his face locked. He walked over to the wooden box, the box that had become a symbol, the box that held the first truth that slipped beyond his control. He opened it, and the air left my lungs. The box was empty. My heart went cold. I knew what that meant. Before I could react, he pulled something from his pocket, the envelope, the medical report. "Is this what you've been looking for?" he asked, shaking it like a trophy. My entire body trembled, but this time, not from fear, from rage, from revelation. He stepped closer, opened his envelope, and tossed the papers onto the table. "You really thought you could go through my things? My things? As if my life, my story, my pain belonged to him." I stayed still, not because I was scared, but because my mind was finally working with surgical clarity. Jerome went on, "The doctor reached out. They want to hear from you again, but I told them you're unstable." Unstable. He loved that word, the perfect word to turn victims into liars. "I already scheduled an appointment with a psychiatrist. You're going to say you exaggerated, that you got confused, that you were tired. They just need consistency. And he pointed to his own chest, I know exactly what they need to hear." The threat was clear, cold, calculated, direct. But he didn't expect what came next. I lifted my head, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I didn't look away. "Jerome, do you really think you still control this story?" He blinked, just once, but it was enough for me to see the crack. "What did you say?" His voice shifted half a tone. Men like him don't know what to do with calm. You're more desperate than you realize, I said, my voice low and steady. And you know why? Because for the first time, someone saw you. Someone documented it. And that you can't erase. He took a step back. Small, almost imperceptible, but I saw it. And in that instant, my entire body aligned with a powerful truth. The fear wasn't just mine anymore. It was his, too. Jerome opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. His breathing was heavy, his eyes unfocused. He hadn't expected resistance, or firmness, or clarity. He expected the broken Naomi, but he met a different woman, a woman rebuilding her spine. And in that moment, this single suspended second, true catharsis happened. I finally understood that Jerome wasn't an untouchable monster. He was a man cornered by his own lies. And men like that fall. And his fall was about to begin, not because of my screams, but because of my evidence. The days after the confrontation felt like walking on glass. Every step cut a little. Every silence hid a new tension. But for the first time, the pain wasn't coming only from me. It was coming from him, too. Jerome was restless, nervous, irritable. The hero he tried to perform was slipping through his fingers like fine sand. And for a man who always controlled everything, that's unbearable. The next morning, he woke up earlier than usual. He moved through the house, opening and closing doors, muttering things I couldn't quite make out. I watched from a distance, noticing every micro-expression, every movement that was too fast, every glance that avoided meeting mine for more than 2 seconds. The mask was cracking, and cracked masks reveal monsters, or men too small to fit inside their own lies. He tried to start a conversation, using that tone of his that blended fake sweetness with implied threat. Naomi, we need to be aligned. People are going to ask what happened. I'm trying to protect you, but you need to cooperate. Cooperate. The word abusers use when they want the victim to confirm their own oppression. I answered only, I know what I'm doing, Jerome. That was enough to knock the ground out from under him for a second. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was firm. Firmness is a language that terrifies men used to submission. Shortly after, he left the house to go to work, or pretend to, because his hurried steps and scattered eyes revealed his mind was fighting another war, the war against the truth. As soon as the door creaked shut behind him, a wave of clarity moved through my body. It was time to act. I grabbed the small bag I'd been preparing quietly for weeks, a bag that held less than anyone would imagine and more than I'd ever had. My chance to survive. I didn't warn him. I didn't hesitate. I didn't make noise. I left the house behind like a body I was finally allowed to abandon. I went straight to Dr. Leanne Morris's office. I didn't make an appointment. I walked in, sat down, and waited. And when she called my name, my legs nearly gave out. It was the first time in years my name was spoken not as accusation, but as care. She listened. She didn't interrupt. She didn't question. She simply let me speak. Not everything, not yet, but enough. And she understood, in seconds. Naomi, what you experienced is violence, and you are at risk. I need to formally document this. You are not imagining anything. I cried. The kind of crying I hadn't done in years. Not from despair, from relief. Relief at being validated. Relief at being seen. Relief that someone believed me before I could even say everything. She activated the proper protocols, filed the report, created an official record. And in that moment, something Jerome had tried to crush for so long stood back up inside me. I exist, and my pain is real. Then she asked, with that calm firmness only trained professionals have, Naomi, do you have somewhere safe to stay tonight? I thought of the person who had tried to reach me so many times before, Alicia. I left the office and went straight to her place. When she opened the door and saw my face, she didn't ask questions. She just pulled me inside and said, "You're safe here." Hearing that sentence, hearing it twice in the same day, was like oxygen reaching lungs that had only known poison. While I was finding ground, Jerome was losing it. Calls started coming in for him. The clinic wanted clarification. The doctor challenged his version. Coworkers noticed his erratic behavior. Even my son, Samuel, was contacted by the medical team asking if I was okay. His story was starting to fall apart, because manipulation only works while there is silence, and my silence was over. Jerome called me over and over that night, long messages, begging, manipulating, accusing, threatening. "You're going to ruin everything. For God's sake, come home. You don't understand the consequences of what you're doing. I can fix this. We can fix this, but you need to listen to me." I didn't answer. For the first time, silence was a weapon, not submission. Alicia set me up in the guest room with a tenderness that almost hurt, because it showed how easy care is when there's no intention to destroy. Lying in that bed, I felt a kind of peace I hadn't known in my own house for years, and I understood. I wasn't just leaving a relationship, I was being reborn. And while I was rising, he was sinking. The fall of the hero had only just begun. I used to think starting over was something grand, almost cinematic. But I learned that real-life beginnings are quiet. They happen when you wake up in a safe place and realize the air doesn't hurt going into your lungs. When you hear your own name without fear. When a creaking door stops being a threat and becomes just a door again. In the first days away from Jerome, my body was still trapped in old reflexes. I startled at footsteps in the hallway. My shoulders tensed when someone called my name. My hands shook when the phone rang. And it was strange, because rationally, I knew I was safe. But the mind of someone who survived doesn't learn that right away. Every day, Alicia greeted me with the same sentence, "You're safe here." And as simple as it was, those words were like clean water entering a body that had been dehydrated for years. The first night, I didn't sleep. The second, I dozed for a few minutes. By the third, I could close my eyes without hearing echoes of Jerome's voice trying to control my breathing. Small victories. Victories only those who've lived this understand. Samuel came to see me on the second day. When he walked through the door, his face carried worry, anger, and relief, a mix no child should ever feel when looking at their mother. He hugged me like he was afraid I might break in half. "Mom, I knew something was wrong. I knew it," he said, his voice cracking. I held his face in my hands and answered the only thing my heart could say. "It's over now, sweetheart. I'm coming back to myself." And looking into my son's eyes, I finally understood the weight of what I'd carried alone for so long. I survived in silence to protect even those who never realized I needed protection. As I rebuilt myself, his world began to collapse, not because of my words, but because of facts, because of evidence he never imagined would surface, because people started connecting strange behaviors, inconsistent stories, cruelty disguised as concern. Dr. Leanne Morris formalized everything. Her report wasn't just paper, it was the first voice that stood beside me. She forwarded my case, notified the proper authorities, and then I got the call that would change my life for good. "Naomi, your protective order has been approved. You are officially safe. He is not allowed to come near you." I closed my eyes and felt my entire body finally release a weight I'd carried for years. It wasn't explosive joy. It was peace arriving slowly, filling spaces that had only known fear. It felt like breathing for the first time since I married him. Jerome tried to call. Again and again. Long messages, manipulative, desperate, full of phrases abusers use when they lose control. Without me, you're nothing. You're destroying my life. You ruined everything. You owe me a conversation. Come home, we'll fix this together. And later, when the mask fell completely, you'll regret what you're doing. People will believe me. You don't know who you're dealing with. But those words had no power anymore. For the first time, his voice wasn't law, wasn't a sentence, wasn't a prophecy. And this emotional disconnection, was the beginning of my real freedom. Because there is no greater revenge against an abuser than surviving without his permission. Weeks passed. I started therapy. I began walking outside. I started choosing my own coffee, my own clothes, my own schedule. Small things, but to me, they were enormous. One day, Alicia came with me to the grocery store. In the cleaning aisle, something simple happened. I touched a bottle with the same scent as the floor cleaner from my old house, and my whole body froze. She took my hand and looked me in the eyes. Breathe with me. Slowly. I'm here. And for the first time, I breathed. Not to obey, not to survive, not to avoid an attack. I breathed to exist. That's when I understood healing doesn't arrive all at once. It comes in waves. Small waves. Waves that wash the soul without drowning it. Today, as I tell you my story, I know exactly who I am. A woman who was hanging by a thread, but who chose, thread by thread, to stitch her life back together. It wasn't revenge that moved me. It wasn't hatred. It was hunger for peace, exhaustion from pain, self-love, even if it had been asleep, asking to wake up. Jerome? He lost his footing. He lost the narrative. He lost control. He lost the one thing he thought he'd never lose, the certainty that I would always be there, small, quiet, surviving inside a house that was never a home. Today, he is the one who falls. He is the one who blacks out. He is the one who can't breathe. Not by my hands, but by the consequences of the story he tried to write over mine. And me? I walked out, and for the first time, the door creaking behind me wasn't a warning. It was freedom. Now, friend who's listening to my voice, yes, I'm talking to you. You who are tired, invisible, afraid of being told you're overreacting. You who learned to breathe small so you wouldn't upset anyone. You who endure more than you should because you think you don't deserve better. Look at me. Listen closely to what I'm about to say. No one has the right to shrink you. No one has the right to rewrite your story. And no one has the right to turn you into silence. You deserve respect. You deserve peace. You deserve a life where fear doesn't live in the corners of your home. You deserve to be loved the right way, starting with yourself. If my story touched your heart, it's not a coincidence. Women recognize the pain of other women, and together we learn to turn pain into a path. I survived, and you can too. One small step, then another, then one more. And when you finally choose to stand on your own side, no one will ever erase you again. This is my story, and now it's just the beginning of my new life.